and welcome to the fifth episode of Base Cafe with Holly and Dean. I'm Holly,
Woo!
and that's Dean.
That's Holly. I'm Dean.
And today we're going to be talking about gear. We're going to start out with what we had as our first gear and what it's got, what we have today, and our path to get there. And we have a really special guest. Why don't you tell us about your special guest,
Yeah,
Dean?
today's guest is Hoogie from WB Gear. He is the bass tech for Shinedown. When I first met him, he was working for Lamb of God. But he's been the liaison between me and so many other musicians for a bunch of companies such as SIT Strings, Intune Guitar Picks, Rev Amps, um, Big Ben's Nut Sauce. It's my favorite company that
Hey, I have
we
pasta
get an
sauce.
endorsement with. Gotta have your nut sauce. Um, makes a difference. Um, but yeah, and so I got to sit down with him and talk about a couple of different things, being a bass tech, and all of that. And we decided to expand upon a little bit more since he's like a gear liaison as well. Him and I got to talk a little bit about sponsorships, and that's some of what Holly and I are gonna jump into also.
Yeah, like what you need versus what you want, because we all want everything, but what do you actually really need in sponsorships?
Right, where's the nexus point where the needs and the wants line up?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, so let's talk about our first gear. What did you have? What was your first?
First base
Yeah.
was I still have it. One of my students has it right now. Actually, I lent it to one of my students
Cool.
to use it for like writing songs and stuff. Um, it was an Ibanez. Well, actually, no. My very first bass, my dad got me a couple weeks after he got me my first guitar. He got it at a swap meet, and it was $35, and it was a Sammy 3/4 bass. I still have it. It's in my son's room. Um, and it was a 3/4 bass, and it was so cool because it wasn't huge. And I was 13, right? But I was just like trying to get used to playing a guitar, and the 3/4 bass was exactly the same as like my guitar. So it was just like literally I was able to conceptualize right away, oh, these are basically the same thing but a little bit different because they
Yeah.
were exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my first guitar amp was a bass amp, or like a lot. I think one maybe I don't know. A lot of my guitar amps over the years were bass amps that I always wound up using with pedals and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Which
But
is
it
not
was that.
super uncommon. Some people do that.
Yeah, and I played that Sammy for a really 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 long time, and then I eventually bought my first bass, which was a like an Ibanez Sound Gear 4 string. It was red, and I painted the fretboard like Peter Steele from Typo Negative, but kind of like his carnivore thing, where instead of it was all green stripes, it was all red stripes. And I put silver and black duct tape all over it, and it kind of looks like an Eddie Van Halen Frankenstein thing.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and that was my my first bass, and I played that for a very, very, very long time. It had a PJ pickup combo. The Sammy had a P bass pickup, and the Ibanez had the PJ pickup combo, and that's might be why I love it. But that's is my absolutely favorite pickup combination is the PJ
Yeah.
for bass. It's just both pickups all the way up, your selector dead center, both pickups. Like it's my fave.
That's great. And what did you play through?
Um, I I always had like like little practice amps and stuff. I had like these no name amps in the beginning. I know one of them was a Park was Steve. Sorry, Jim Marshall's wife's maiden name, right? So like Their Epiphone version of amps were called Parks. I had those, and then I had customs. I was given a custom combo amp
Mm-hmm.
and a custom head. And oh my god, it just brought me back. I had a crate head. Oh man, I'm trying to remember the model. I still have the I have a bass head that it has like a little EQ on it. I got it from one of my friends. I used it as my first guitar head forever. I forgot about that. It's since
Was it
been ripped
a
apart.
combo or it was just a head?
It was just a head. It was just a head. Yep.
My
And I
first
would like
guitar
borrow
actually was a little
cabinets, you know, to
combo.
use sometimes, but it had like the graphic EQ on it. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember that model. I wound up I can't remember because I covered up when I try and like go back to a memory for a visual image, right?
Hmm.
I covered up the model with a Dragula like
Yeah.
trading card. So when I'm like trying to think of like how the amp looks, all I see right there is Dragula, you know?
Dracula.
Yeah. Yeah,
Dracula.
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, but that was my main gear for a long time, and that stuff went it switched between guitar and bass because
Mm.
but like I did have my first bass really early on, so it was like these two sides of my musicianship, they've always been intertwined, and there's very many times when I play bass I use guitar things, and sometimes when I do guitar things I use bass things. Like I've always gone both ways, baby.
Well, there's a
What?
lot of bands that do that.
Yeah, it's you know, it's when a guitar player also gets a bass real early on. It's a real easy transition to be a dual musician
Hmm.
versus like not getting one later on or like or only playing guitar. Like you know, when someone only plays guitar, it might be harder for them to grasp bass. But a lot of us, you know, we get both of those right off the bat, baby.
Yeah.
Um, what about you? What was your first bass?
Well, my first bass was borrowed from my guitar player because
Oh
he
wait, how
played.
old were you? How old are you?
I was I was 27 when I started playing bass.
All right, all right.
Yeah.
Vicious 27.
Yeah. Which is crazy because my drummer in Zuccarello, she was 27 when she started playing drums. It's
It's
pretty
funny.
cool. And
I started playing when I was 13,
yeah,
and a lot of the members of a lot of the bands that I've been in,
yeah.
they've all also started at 13.
Right. So I started playing guitar at 13, but
Right.
as we've talked about before, I didn't
Right,
understand it.
right.
I didn't get it. And so later on, when I decided I really wanted to be in a band, 14 years later, I just I said, okay, I'll play bass. I just took the job, and I didn't know how to play bass. I knew the names of the strings. I didn't know anything about it. But the bass that I practiced on at home, I think might have been an Ibanez or something. It was just a borrowed bass, but the one that I played and eventually got after my like second or third rehearsal was a Dean Razorback, and I had a Dean Flying V,
All right. So you had
and
some dime bag basses. All
yeah,
right.
some dime bag basses. I'm from Dallas, so this
Right.
is just where
Right.
this is
Right.
what we do, and it's a kind of metal-ish band, kind of hardcore rock metal band. So, yeah, and I played with my fingers. I didn't play with a pick. I didn't know anything really about the tone. I just knew that I needed to cut through, so I think I just had everything up as far as it would go. Um, the the what I played through, I actually still have. And on some of the other videos, you can see the Edens, the
Mm-hmm.
double stack. But I only played through one, and I had I don't know what wattage it was, but it was also borrowed. Was before I got my hard key that I have now. Um, an Ampeg. I don't know what it was. It was just like a
I'm a huge Ampeg fanatic. I have
yeah.
a
It was just
SVT2
yeah.
Pro right there.
Yeah, it probably was that. I don't know. I really don't even remember.
I have I
I
have
didn't
so
even know
many
how to hook it
firsts.
up most of the time. We got to our first few gigs and they had to hook it up for me.
Right, right.
But eventually I learned, eventually I figured it out.
So you you basically had you didn't did you have like a practice rig like right away, or did you have a practice amp right away, or did you have
Yeah,
like just a play live rig right away?
where I was living at the time, I lived with a music collector. So a music instrument collector. So I got to play their instruments and their bass rig at home. But I really didn't play, I didn't really hook anything up when I was playing at home. I just I would listen to the tracks that we had. And you know how you were talking about how Nita would do like 5 times. She makes sure she does the same thing 5 times. I
Yep.
would, at this point, I was trying to do 10. I was really drilling in it because I was brand new, I didn't know anything. So I would listen to the track 10 times. I would play it through 10 times. And then I would listen to it again 10 times. And I would do that with every single, I spent like 6 hours a day practicing like
And
that.
well, so you learned because you were getting ready to go right on stage.
Yeah, 6 weeks. I had 6 weeks to learn how to play bass and play 10 songs and try to get some kind of stage presence in there. And I really didn't have much. So I
Right.
just, I dressed up in a costume.
While you were
I did the
practicing?
Robert Palmer girl thing.
Did you so you were always practicing the live show basically out the gate then?
Well, I didn't start doing that until my second band. I didn't realize how important that was, but I really couldn't understand. Well, I'm
How
sorry, no,
long
that's
after
not
that
true.
was your
That's
second
not
band?
true. That's not true. The first year, I think, or the first 6 months at least, I wasn't trying to move around. I was just trying to get the music right. And then my guitar player, he was kind of a stickler for stage presence. So he would even yell at me on stage. So stupid.
Who was your like your favorite kind of band at the time?
At the time,
Like
Clutch,
your
of
favorite
course.
listening band at the time?
Clutch. Like I listened to Clutch,
Right.
like I was listening to Clutch constantly. Um,
And what kind of music was this band versus Clutch?
very different. I
Right.
mean, it was still heavy, but it was very, very, very different. I wasn't writing any of this music, it was just, it was, well, so we had Nikki McKibben from American Idol, and she's got this gorgeous voice. And then the guitar player was a bass player and he turned guitar player, so he was still learning guitar and I was learning bass. So you can
You
imagine,
should have just
like,
learned guitar and then it would have been half the or played the
I
guitar and it would
know,
have been half the battle. No, that's
but
cool.
I
That's
was
cool.
still
Yeah,
afraid to
see,
do that.
I always felt like I didn't start early enough, and there you are starting twice as late.
Yeah, and then I caught it. I caught on twice as quickly, I think, because I really wanted
Well,
it
because you
at that
worked
point.
at it,
Yeah, I
right?
worked at it. At 13, I just thought it's too hard. I don't want to do it. Which is funny because I still go through the same motions when I'm sitting down to learn a piece of music. I still go through this whole like, oh God, I have to fucking learn this, or sorry.
Yeah,
But
like I.
it never stops.
So it was a job for you though, right off the bat. So many people when they start off, right? Usually
Yeah.
it's if they're older.
Not later on. Later
Yeah,
on, it was fine, but before, it was more of a job. Like it was more like I don't, I just don't get it.
right, right. Yeah. So for me, it was just like I was like this isolated teen,
Yeah.
and just my whole life, I've had this is just the heads, all right? But most of my life, I've had all of the heads and all of the cabinets, like
Yeah.
everything all around me, all of the guitar, like everything's. I've always had like a lot of gear,
Mhm.
and I've always had it all around me. Um, but I've just because of that, I always experimented with stuff, and it was always a very personal journey for me. Where you, it was still a personal journey, but it was like an instant task where like I don't know. I was just fucking make. I was just making it up along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, my journey was really slow because I would take really like long extended breaks in between trying to sit down and learn music. And right before I got this first bass job, I was trying to relearn guitar, and I was teaching myself. I have this book, everything about the blues and rock and roll. And I was just going through it. And I had a friend that was a really awesome guitar player. I ended up playing with him later on. But he gave me a gig after I got better. And he was teaching me some stuff, but it's still just, I knew I wanted to do it. And then I got a Mac, and Mac has GarageBand. So he
Right.
also taught me how to do some loops and stuff in GarageBand, and I made 17 songs my first month in GarageBand. It was a great creative outlet for me.
Right.
And so I showed this guy who was needing a bass player, and he's like, "Oh, you can sing. Do you want to play bass?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he happened to see me pick up a bass a couple of times. The only times that I ever picked up a bass and played, was he was there, and he had always had it in the back of his mind that maybe I could play bass for him. And he came in, and I was doing his hair, and I let him listen to the music, and he's like, "I want you to play bass for me." And so I was like, "Okay." And he's like, "We've got a show in 6 weeks," and I just said, "Okay."
Word. Yeah. See, I started playing kind of like bass like alongside, right? But then I had my own. I built my own studio. I always had like a little setup, right? And with that, I started getting more into bass because I needed to make my own demos. So
Mhm.
like again, my journey was so slow and personal in the beginning, um, and then I had to upgrade to a 5 string because I had upgraded my guitar playing to a 7 string, right? And it just made life easier for me to have the 5 string to go right alongside. Again, just as my very first bass was a 3/4 bass, and it was like a perfect guitar, like the fret spacing was all the same, everything, right?
Mhm.
Same deal when I went to the 7 string, then I went to a 5 string, and I did that. And actually, at the time, I think before I even got a five, I think I bought a 6 string because like I did like a trade, and this guy just had that, and so it was like almost the same exact guitar. It was like the bass was missing 1 string, otherwise it was like two of the same, right? Um, and that pushed me in that direction. But you stayed at 4 string always, right?
Yeah, I didn't think I really needed to branch out too much because my focus wasn't on anything but rock and classic rock.
Well, where did the upright come in play then?
That was given to me.
Oh, all right.
I had never even really played it that much. Yeah, it was given to me by a friend of mine who he restores band equipment from schools, and he happened to have one that they were going to throw away. So he called me. He said, I, I would bring it to you if you want it," and he just brought it over.
My my whole life I have wanted one of those.
Oh, his best friend got pissed at him for giving it to me and not him because he's a really awesome bass player.
I I play a lot in the punk scene, because of the
Hmm.
punk scene. It's really the horror punk scene,
Hmm.
which is really close to the rockabilly scene.
Yep.
And I love all these dudes that play these
Yeah.
coffin basses, these stand up basses, these basses that look like 50 mercs with the flames and all this stuff. And oh
Yep.
my, I love it.
I
I love the
there
way
was
it looks, and I love the way it sounds. And like one of my favorite friends' bands is Stellar Corpses
mm,
from Santa Cruz.
mm,
And I love that jump. Like I feel like anytime that there's an upright bass in a song,
yeah.
it makes you want to dance.
Yeah, there was a band in Dallas called Spectre 45, and they had it's a three-piece and the upright bass like that, and um, really, really awesome band. And I think it influenced a lot of people around there. And anyways, those two guys, the two front guys, ended up both committing suicide. Really horrible thing. If you ever go to Dallas and you see the hearts with the 45, it's for them, and there's like a whole suicide prevention thing for them and stuff. But
Oh, good.
anyway, sorry that's on the like,
Yeah, you know.
but yeah, but that's the only time I've ever really seen that live. As far as there are still some really cool bands out there that are.
So it's funny you bring that up. I do want to touch on that real quick. Me playing music. I'm gonna go off script a little bit here, everyone.
Sure.
It's been a personal journey, and I felt like an angst teen. I felt like I didn't belong,
Mhm.
but I always felt like my life was complete any time that a guitar or a bass was in my hand. And it's very true.
Yeah.
And my dad got me my first guitar on my 13th birthday, and then a couple months later, that Sammy bass. And I swear to God to you, like I just went through some of my old notebooks. I used to write songs right off the bat.
Mhm.
Like right away, I saw that playing bass and playing guitar were like. And when I write, I just looked through the notebooks last night. I got them back from an old friend. Um, like my first notebooks of my first songs with lyrics and tabs. And every time that there was a guitar tab, there was a bass tab right next to it. And it didn't always, wasn't always the same part. Sometimes it was a harmony. Sometimes it was,
Mhm.
a different feel, a different vibe. Um, but I never got pushed to suicidal thoughts because I always had this outlet. I got really lucky when that stuff was put in my lap. It
Yeah.
all started to make sense.
Yeah. That's.
Um, that's really, really, really important to me. It's exactly why I've been here and why I feel so good,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I totally understand. I think I was looking for that kind of outlet when I was younger, but unfortunately, I lived with the school bully and couldn't get away from it. So it kind of I think he kind of bullied me into not playing as much as I should have too. So, but eventually I came around and started playing. And it does give you something else to look forward to because when you get into music, whether you want to play on stages or not, there's still a big community out there. And I grew up with a very musical family on my dad's parents' side. So anytime I was there, they were always playing guitar, always singing, always and very close family that way. Um, and so I always thought that music does bring people together, and it's a language that we all can speak if we can all at least listen to it. We can get a lot from it. We
I
can
yeah, I see. Like I used to write like a lot of poetry, right? When you're trying to express your feelings, um, it's it's so literal,
Mhm.
literally, literature. Like it's so literal.
Yeah.
When I switched those feelings to the secret journal of a chord or a bass run,
Mhm.
uh, that's where I got like a little bit more solace,
Mhm.
where I could get this release pressure free. Right? Like I could get this release, and if anyone heard it, they weren't going to know the exact meaning release. Right? It's like
Yeah.
being able to go up to a punching bag, but no one ever knows what punches you through.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? They just know that you hit the bag, and they
Mhm.
don't know what the punches were. They don't know what
Yeah.
And there's a lot to that. And like nowadays, I use that as a way to spread my message and
Mhm.
say what's on my mind. But um, I just wanted to jump on that because
Yeah.
for me, I feel so complete. And I lost my dad, and you know, we'll be dropping this what, on the 3rd or something, 2nd to 3rd, whatever that Monday is, but we're filming this on New Year's Eve, which is my dad's birthday. And after losing him, um it makes me one of these things that makes me feel so good is anytime I use these tools or anytime I share these things with these people, like things like this podcast. It's such a beautiful gift that gets to give back. And I've anchored on music to fill that void of being lost. If you I also like stars, space, and planets. And when you think on a universal level like that, we are so small, and you can sometimes feel so insignificant. But if you give yourself a purpose,
Mhm.
right? I can't explain my love, my um, magnetism to music. I can't
Yeah.
explain it. I just know that it's there. I noticed it and I embrace it.
Right.
And some people are that way about sports, and some people are that way about writing or acting, right?
Mhm.
I love this creativity outlet that we
Yeah.
get. And one of the best things about this gear thing is like you get like spikes of endorphins anytime like you upgrade your bass or something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, or you find that perfect tone for
Or
you.
you find the perfect tone. Dude, listen, guys, everybody, tone is so important. You have to understand. You
Long
have
and
to understand
fuzzy.
what good tone is. About that, I think the reason why I bought my first Ibanez off this kid for $100, is a lot of the bass players that I listened to. They played two companies at that time. It was mainly either Ibanez or it was Fernandez.
Hmm.
Those
Yeah,
two companies were like rocking 90s rock and roll. And it was just always this thing that I heard on in the street, like, oh, if you want to an Ibanez, if you get yourself an Ibanez, man, you won't be upset. You won't be upset. Like they had this great reputation for an inexpensive, awesome bass.
yeah,
They didn't always look great. They didn't always have like the coolest cuts and whatever on all their basses. They were kind of round and like, bleh.
yeah,
But um, they were known to be reliable most of the time.
yeah.
Like, and a decent price. And that's also probably why I play with a pick, not just because I also play guitar, but all the bands I listen to. Again, I grew up listening to a lot of industrial music.
Hmm.
They all used picks, right? Um, and you were into Clutch at the time.
Yeah.
What other bands are you into? Did you like start learning and adapting that style from like once you had to learn the stuff for these songs? Did you learn like songs that you liked and try and emulate certain tones from certain bands?
I was a workhorse because I got thrown into the fire and I had to maintain this, knowing the songs. Then as soon as we got those songs down, there was new songs to learn. Plus, I was working on my stage presence. I mean, I was really working on all of this stuff at once. So I had no time to learn theory, learn anything but, the numbers of the frets, And so after that band, I went straight into another band where I was a co-writer.
How was your bass tone in the first band?
I don't horrible as far as I'm concerned because I would never have had that tone now. If I would have choose if I could go back and learn about tone, I wouldn't have had that tone. But that tone was chosen by the guitar player of the band for
That'll
that band.
happen. That'll happen.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. If
Bass
you don't
players
know,
get bullied.
yeah, if you don't, yeah, yeah. If you don't know about your tone, yeah, they're gonna tell you about your tone. So,
Yep.
um,
Bass players definitely get bullied in practice. They get bullied on the stage. Now here's
yeah,
a big thing. Most people think, and we all think so too. Like so much of the best part of the bass as an instrument is the bass frequency, that low end. But if you
yeah,
don't have your tone set up right, where
yeah,
your low ends with your highs with your mids, if you don't have those tones EQ'd out right, you're going to get told to turn down every time. If you're
every
only
time.
boosting those frequencies that rumble people's guts and not anything above that where they can hear it too, you're just always going to be told to turn down. And so you can turn down those rumbling shit frequencies that are great for your subwoofer, not for the stage, right? And um you turn them down with EQs and you boost up those higher lows,
Yeah,
right? Those low mids
yeah, and you
area,
cut
and then
through.
you can get some of that stuff where you can
Yeah.
hear it and feel it.
Hmm.
And and for me playing with the pick, that high end noise is so important. That string twang for me,
Yeah,
opposite of you, right,
yeah,
is it's so important that I get it, that even um if I have old strings on, I have to try and like boost that signal a little bit in the EQ so that way I can keep that tone.
yeah. That it's just such a tone is such a crazy concept if you don't know anything about it, right? And tone comes from everything. It comes from your instrument. It comes from your gear. It comes from your fingers. It comes from how you play. It comes from your fingernails, especially if you're playing with your fingers. If your fingernails are not cut, you're gonna hear that on the bass string,
Can you
and the
repeat that? Can
strings.
you repeat that? I'd like you to say that one more time. Because
So
no, because this is I we've never touched on this and I can't believe it, but yeah, please say
yeah,
that again. I like this.
tone comes from everything. It doesn't just come from the knobs on your on your rig. It comes from the instrument you play, it comes from the rig, it comes from your fingers, it comes from your strings, it comes from your fingernails, it comes from how you play it, all of your attack, if you play with a pick, everything in your tone comes from you and your personal choices in your gear and how you play.
Yeah, it's everything. The
Everything.
microscopic angles of your
It's your
hands
it's
and
your
how you
musical
approach it.
thumbprint. It's your
Yep.
musical thumbprint. And I was asked this on Tone Talk with Guitar Girl magazine. Go get your 2021 calendar. Like, what year is
Woo.
it? Oh my God. 2021 calendar. I missed July. Anyways, Tone Talk, they asked us, what does your tone mean to you? Or what does tone mean to you? And I said, it's your musical fingerprint. It's because
Yeah,
nobody
it
has,
really is.
because
It's
if you listen, and we've talked about this with great basis, if you listen to any of them that you can hear there's specific tone, you know who it is. You know who John Paul Jones is because of how he sounds. You know who Fieldy is because how he sounds. And those are completely opposite spectrum of the spectrum, but it's that's it. That's encompassed exactly what we're
one
talking about.
personal accomplishment that I remember the exact moment that it happened, right? Because like along our musical journeys, we have these little mountains and molehills of accomplishments along the way. And one something that I view as a compliment is I was building this like guitar. It was a seven-string guitar instrumental band. It was just me and another guitar player, and we'd rent out this room and we just had all of our pedals lined up, and I would use my whammy and I would do the bass lines on my seven string, or he would play my bass and I'd play guitar, or I'd play the bass and he'd play guitar, and we were just like making noise. We were making
Yeah,
noise, we were making rhythmic noise, we were jamming. It was
yeah,
so much fun.
yeah.
But one of the things that I take as such a big compliment, at least I take it as such a huge compliment, is one of my other band members throughout this crazy project that we had together was just making noise. It was guitar and bass and
Mhm.
pedals and all this stuff. But he told me that no matter what instrument I played on, no matter what rig I was on, whether it was guitar or bass, when I switched, it sounded like me playing.
Yeah,
And that's the truth. It's because it was about me playing the instrument. You know how I played my guitar or my bass in that rig. We could have different settings all throughout. Maybe yeah, maybe I tweak stuff, but like it was always told to me that no matter what rig I was playing on, it sounded like me.
yeah.
That's a huge compliment.
Hmm.
Huge compliment, right? And people have to realize that.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
Rob
I mean,
Flynn from Machine Head says 86% of your tone comes from your fingertips, man. You
yeah,
know?
yeah. It does.
And
It
so
really
now
does.
with that, with tone, right? And finding your tone, so much of that is once you get your beginner gear, well, then
Hmm.
where do you upgrade? How do you upgrade
Right.
through your gear? Like, do you start with your bass? Do you start with your amp? Do you start with pedals?
Yeah.
So after for me, I was always a pedal guy. Like amps were always so expensive, and so the cheaper alternative to buying basses and buying amps was buying pedals.
Yeah. Yeah. The first thing I did when I got my first Fender was I put flat wounds on it. That's the
Mm,
first thing I
mm.
did. I was playing round wounds in my first band on the Demonator and the Flying Bee, and that was the sound for that band. But when I went to the next band and I had a different sound, more of a classic rock sound, and I switched to flat wounds
And that'll change your tone right off the bat.
completely. Yeah,
Yeah,
completely changes your
yeah.
tone.
What size strings you use, it all matters. And
Yeah,
like, in someone like me, I'm hardcore about changing my strings. The second that they start to lose their sharpness, they're gone.
and that's another tone thing.
Yep. Yeah, and well, see, because it makes it easier for me to, because all right, so about talking about tone and EQ, it's always better to have your signal and then cut stuff out
Mhm.
than have a signal that is missing something and trying to boost that signal.
Yeah,
So if I
exactly.
want a certain frequency of the twang,
Mhm.
I can EQ out the frequencies I don't want easier and better sounding than
Mhm.
I can trying to put an EQ on that bass that will
Yeah.
boost up those frequencies that have died in those strings.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can do it, but it's not going to sound as good. And so that's, that's a real important thing to consider when it comes to tone is it's so much easier to have more and take out than
Mhm.
it is to try and boost something that isn't there.
Yeah. I asked my friend Ace Bergman, who is Slash's guitar tech, once how he dials in Slash's, what he does. He's like, I don't know, I just, to where it sounds good, I guess. But his kind of rule of thumb is, start in the middle and take out what you don't want. And then once from there, then boost what you do want. And so that's
Yep.
a really easy, simple rule of thumb. If you're, especially if you plug into a new amp or a new gear, or it's a different kind of bass, start in the middle and then take out what you don't like and then put in more what you like.
One of the first things I do on all of my rigs is a I always have brand new strings when I'm like if I'm doing like a tone search or if I'm doing a recording or if I'm like prepping for tour. The first thing, brand new strings in the setup,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And the
Always.
setup is another thing that
And a
changes as
setup,
well.
yeah, your intonation has a lot to do with your tone. How
Yeah.
your bass resonates with the kick drum,
Mhm.
that matters.
Yeah, and
Um,
also with drummers, and I didn't realize this until I started dating a drummer, that it all of their different drums, like all the different drum heads, they all have different sounds too. Like the clear ones versus the
yeah,
ones that are I didn't really I mean I
the
could
coated, the single
decode it,
ply,
yeah.
the double ply,
Yeah,
two
yeah.
ply rather.
So, and I want to get into drumming, drums eventually into this podcast too because it's so important. But I didn't realize any of that. And now that I do, I'm like, wow, there's just so much. There's so much to it.
There's so much to it, and that's another thing too. Is when it comes to your bass tone, you have to consider: does it complement my drummer?
And guitar,
Does it complement my guitar player?
even your
Again,
singer, you can drown out a singer.
yeah, yeah, of course you can.
Yeah.
But you can make so much low resonance with your bass rig that the kick drum doesn't have the same effect. If you're taking up the whole area,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's also why a lot of sound guys give a lot of high end to the
Mm-hmm.
kick drum, a lot of that click to the kick drum is because in a live setting, the bass is taking up all of those low frequencies.
Right. Right.
And again, it comes down to you using an EQ and taking some of those things out.
Mm-hmm.
Just the same way, like when you do albums, you have your bass signal and your kick drum,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have a side chain compressor, right? And so every time that kick hits, it's muting the bass signal for that momentary second. So that way, because if you just had like your bass signal going and
Yeah.
then the kick hitting every time the kick hit, if the bass was at like its best top volume,
Do it,
every
drown it.
time the kick hit, it would just go
It sounds
right,
horrible.
and that's what our old demos used to sound like.
Yeah.
But they do the side chain compression, so every time the kick hits,
Yeah.
it mutes that bass for just that momentary second, so
It
you can
cuts
hear
through.
just that.
Yeah.
And that if you're EQing, things like that can happen more naturally live,
Mm-hmm.
right? Maybe not completely, right? Unless you have that kind of setup, but that's how they do it on the records. It's why the records sound so good, you know. Linking stuff together, everything has to meld in a band. And so that's another thing too when it comes to upgrading. Some of your upgrades have to be tailored to your job
Mm-hmm.
versus tailored to what you might want to do.
Yeah.
Because I play bass in so many gigs, I have to constantly be working on my bass rig and shaping my tones and working on my gear. Whereas if I didn't have those gigs, maybe a lot more of my journeys would be on the guitar end. Maybe
Yeah.
I'd have 17 more guitar amps.
Yeah,
I
exactly. Yeah, and it goes
don't
into,
know.
what you need versus what you want.
Right, right.
I would love to fill my house with everything that I've ever seen that I just absolutely love, but I
I
don't
want
need.
a I want a sick dark glass setup. I want right there. I want all their pedals. I want all their amps. I want everything. And I
Yeah.
was almost gonna get them for tour. Um, and I really think that that is a sound that I could benefit for my tone. Right now, I use fractal. I have this fractal Axe effects, and I just, even though I want that dark glass setup, I don't need that dark glass setup
Mhm.
because I have my Axe effects setup that does multiple things for me, and because I am both a guitar player and a bass player, an Axe effects setup makes more sense
Mhm.
because I can do both.
Yeah.
And if I want to amplify it, I just hook it up to one of these things. you know
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
what
and
was your did you have like a sought after piece of gear that you were like, one
um,
day I'm gonna have this?
what I have now, like I have three different Fender basses. So they're all different. So one's a 60s model, one's 2008, and then one's a 72, 74 short scale. So I have it's kind of the same tone on all three of them, but they're all Fender and they're all beautiful and I love them.
Right,
So those
right,
are all the basses that I wanted. And then as far as gear, I have my Fender 8x10 cab, and then I have my hybrid amp, the
right.
basement amp. So it's just wonderful. So I have the gear that I've always wanted.
That
I
amp
would
and
like,
everything, that's the amp that you've always wanted,
hmm,
like even the head.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All
We got
right.
lucky and figured it out. But it was because I wanted the Jones setup, and I pretty much got that. He had a different head because
Definitely had a tubed head.
yeah, he had, yeah, but now
Yeah.
it's hybrid, so we went with that one, and it's
Right, right. Yeah, I know.
because
The Ampeg SVT2 that I have, that bass head, I've
yeah.
wanted that forever. Even as a guitar player, I wanted that head. You know what I
Well, I'll
mean?
tell
Like,
you, I never even knew that I wanted this head in specifically until I realized it's only 15 pounds.
right. Again, I have all these amps and I don't use them because the Axe FX goes in the overhead and it's in the
Exactly.
rack and everything
Yeah.
all lined up
Yeah.
with the wireless, all the cables, everything is 27 pounds.
Yeah. And
Like,
that was our first conversation was about how you guys tour, and I thought that was just amazing.
yeah,
And
right. Because when we
talking
met
about like,
you, that was on the second Nita Strauss tour. We had zero amps. The
yeah.
first tour, the band had amps because we all came from New Jersey and
Mm,
Nita didn't.
mm,
But in this second one, we all flew in to North Carolina to start. They flew in from the West Coast. I flew in from Jersey,
mm,
and yeah, and we that was just like the setup. It made sense. If I didn't have a digital
mm.
amp setup, I don't even know if what I would have done.
Yeah.
Like you know, like
Yeah.
it wasn't really discussed. Like it wasn't discussed.
Mm,
Don't bring your amp. It
right.
was just that I knew I had to fly in
Mm,
and I knew I had the means to do so, so I did it,
yeah.
right? But like it wasn't I don't know because I also flew into Cali for some of those. Maybe we talked about it a little bit, but no, we didn't because it wasn't because for the California shows on the beginning of that tour, Johnny had his guitar rig because we were in California.
Yeah.
So it was completely our option
Yeah.
on what to do. I just would have had to figure it out my damn self on getting a rig. Oh,
Okay.
but I probably could have used yeah, like we
Yeah.
toured with the band. Like it just came down to convenience and
Right.
tone. I
Right.
can rely on my tone
Yeah.
on an Axe Effects by turning it on.
Yeah, and
And I know it
I want to
sounds
touch
like that.
on that for our viewers. So when you tour, there's one or two things that happen. You either bring your own gear or you buy what is called a backline, and that's on your rider. So it is up to a backline company with whatever. whatever city you're going into next to provide whatever's on your list. It doesn't always happen that way though, unfortunately.
Oh no.
You get crappy gear. You
Always.
get the last gear, especially if there's a festival coming in and that backline company has got all of their good stuff out. I've done tours where you go there and the bass player in the first band, you're playing their rig that they made at home, and you're just like, what is going on?
Yeah, and you walk
So
up to it, right? And you're like, "Oh, that's not so bad." And then they like take the rack cover off. It's like ging 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 and there's like cables everywhere and wirelesses and
yeah,
every
or
time you hit
like
the volume knob.
or speakers that are way too big and way too small, and the combination is just and like not good. Anyways,
Yeah, not enough power
that's a
and
personal
before you
experience.
show up I've showed
So
up I've showed up for a backline and there was an 8x10 powered
uh-huh.
by one of those little tiny crate, like the little tiny crate like
Yeah,
put in your back
the
pocket and I'm
black
like,
box. They
"What?"
usually call those a black box or something. The little
I don't remember. Yeah. And I'm a huge Crate fan, so I'm not just hating, but like,
it just
dude,
didn't do it. Yeah. So, but what we're trying to avoid is by by you bringing your fractal or me bringing my gear or whatever, is we're trying to avoid
inconsistencies.
tone from differences in tone
Inconsistencies.
and inconsistencies in each show, because we want to give you the same show every night because that's what you pay for. So we want to make sure that it sounds how we want it to sound.
So
And
much of, and I guess this is what this episode has really been around, but like so much of not just your musical knowledge, right? Theory
mhm,
knowledge, but so much of who you are as a musician is the way you sound. We are noisemakers. So if
mhm.
the sound you make sucks, you're
That's
not,
who you are.
maybe you suck, but like that's our job. Our job is to sound good when we're making noise, right?
And our
Like that's
job, our
it's
job is to figure
physically
out
the
how to
job
do that.
description.
Mhm. It is our, yeah, it's our job.
It's physically, it's like the only requirement is like, all right, what you're gonna make is gonna be loud. It's
Uh-huh.
gonna be, like gut wrenching, ear shattering, nose bleeding,
Yeah.
like thumping, punching, this, but it's got to sound good.
It's
Like
gotta
it
sound
can't
good.
do it can't be all those things. It can't be
Yeah.
descriptive if it
Mhm.
just sounds like a 90s death metal
Mhm.
band.
Yeah.
And you
It needs to have
just
playability, and it needs to sound like how you're wanting it to sound. Now, if you want a band that's real eclectic and has really weird sounds, then go for it. But if you're wanting to have like a metal band and you want to have the tone for a metal band, if you want to be a classic rock band, you need the tone for a classic rock band. And
right.
it's
And now it's all subjective. You just got to make sure that the noise that you make sounds good to you.
true.
Right? And
I
that's
did
that's really what it is.
It's That's true. I did talk to a bass player who played. We played a Zepparella played a show, and then it was at a casino. So afterwards, you go through the casino, and there's a house band playing. And the house band was there at our show before, and I talked to the bass player, and he asked me what I thought about his playing and his gear, and I had to tell him, I'm like, it sounds awful. I mean, your playing's great. No, the playing was great. He was hitting. I mean,
Yeah,
he's
yeah, no, I
great.
know. I know. I know what you
But
mean.
he used this, it's a cover band, and he used the same tone for every single song. And it just, you could hear it. It was horrible. And so I told him, I'm like, okay, can I mess with your knobs? I said, I totally won't if it's
Can
offensive.
I turn your knob,
Yeah,
son?
I just said, can I dial you in real quick? And he's like, yeah. And so I did it. And every single one of his band members was like, wow, it sounds really good.
Sometimes, well, see, that's another thing too. And that's to should stop discouragement. Like sometimes you're only just like a knob turn away.
Yeah, just,
Like you just gotta come into your own. And
yeah.
so and that's why your needs and your wants turn into your whys and your hows, right? Um and for me, number one secret to anything that I would consider my tone, right off the bat, is I believe in this golden rule. What is more important than the noise that your guitars and your basses make?
What?
The noise that they don't make.
Mm.
And so because of that, and that's the God's honest truth. I usually like I grab a guitar and I'll show you. You could play Dream On by Aerosmith and you
Mhm.
play these three power chords, But if you don't mute those other three strings when you're playing that A string power chord, it sounds god awful,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So like the people, if you want people to appreciate what you're doing,
Mhm,
sometimes all you have to do is not do some of the other stuff. So
mhm,
for me, my tonal secrets right off the bat, guitar or bass, the same exact two pedals come with me everywhere. Even with the fractal,
mhm.
I always bring these two pedals also, and it's I have a Dynacomp MXR Dynacomp and an ISP decimator. Those two pedals, I bring up the noise and I shut it up. It is the best combination out of anything I've ever done.
Mhm.
I can control my noise, you
Yeah.
know, and so much again, it's not so much about giving more, it's
Yeah.
about having it not be there. The reason why I really use the compressor with the noise gate is because where this noise gate hits perfectly for me when I need it to close, right? Um, when I come in without a compressor, it takes a second. So I like with the compressor, I come in right away,
Yeah.
and with the gate, I shut up right away.
Yeah.
And it's just that I needed to just if you know adjust that sweet spot on the noise gate for me, and for my setup. Um,
Now, did you do that by buying the gear and then trial and error, or did you go try out the gear?
I always, always, always had noise gates. I always
Mhm,
was in that era.
mhm.
And for like 10 to 15 years, between myself and every other metal guitar player out there, we've been fighting feedback, right? Because
Yeah.
all these things, you add fuzz and distortion and gain, and there's always feedback. And like, that's the biggest difference you can tell between an amateur band and a pro band
Mhm.
is that when the pro band is up on stage, when they're done, they're done. When they
Yeah.
finish a song, they finish a song. You don't hear a goddamn thing. When the amateur band is done, it's like
Yeah. Somebody's got a gear problem.
yeah, and well, that's what it always is. Is that I think
Bad
like a big problem is
cable or yeah,
for
the
but
guitar's
for
too
guitars
long.
and bass, you know, on these stages, when especially when you're coming up in the ranks,
Hmm.
like your amps are set up in front of all of the other band's amps. So
Yeah.
that means your amp is on your ass.
Yeah.
So much of you know, my journey was opening up and selling tickets for other bands. You know, those of you who don't know, because
Yeah.
who knows if we'll ever play shows again, but the way
A
the way
lot of
you come
places
up in
do
the
it.
ranks is you when you work at a venue, like
Mhm.
you work out of your local venue, right? You find your local venue that you want to play out of all the time, and you know maybe a couple of them here and there, and you work up the ranks so that way when the big band comes into town, you can get on that show. You talk with that promoter, you make that club believe you. You bring all these people to this club that no one wants to go to on a Tuesday night, and they might just offer you an opportunity to have to sell a minimum of 40 tickets to play with this other band. You know, and
100
by the way, you're
or
responsible
100,
for
I don't
all
know.
that money. If you don't sell the tickets, you don't play, by the way. But, you know, and you get paid like $1 a ticket, if that, maybe two beers. And and you do all of this to get on this show, your amp's right up on you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
And you don't have any space to move around because your drummer is also in front of the other drummer.
Right. And now, so with bass, I noticed that especially because it's so dynamic
Yeah.
that sometimes some of the lows are too loud and sometimes some of the highs are too quiet.
Yeah.
And so I brought the compressor into my guitar rig with the noise gate, so that way when I was in started becoming in and being in those headlining bands,
Hmm.
now my amps were further back.
Yeah.
And now when I wanted feedback, so I played in these punk rock bands, when I wanted feedback, I had to turn around
Hmm.
and go towards the amp, which took
Yeah.
me away from the crowd,
Yeah.
right? Took me away from the show.
Yeah.
When I play a show, I'm in your
You want to be up
face.
there. Yeah.
I'm like, I'm here. I'm sing. If I like, I don't do backup vocals in the songs, but when I see people singing around, I get down on my knees and I sing with you while I'm playing. Man,
Yeah.
that's what we do. We have fun. We're at a rock show.
Yeah.
So I put the compressor in. I just bought it out of pure pot luck. I bought these two compressors at Guitar Center. One of them was broken and the other one wasn't. And I noticed that when it was on, I could be all the way on the front of the stage and just tap the strings and it'd be like, and it was like perfect. It was like I was doing it with the volume knob,
Yeah.
volume pedal rather. So it was just perfect. And then I instantly put that in my bass rig when I realized what it did there, and I go nowhere without those two pedals. It's just
Yeah. Good. You said you have a Sans amp too. You run with?
I do. I have. Well, I've had Sans amps. Currently, I have the MXR equivalent. It's the MXR Bass DI.
Yeah.
So if before I had the Fractal, my backup always, anytime I play a live show too, is not only do I have the Fractal or the amp or whatever, but I always bring this MXR Bass DI, and which is basically like if I could have a dark glass, that's what I would have. I'd have like their Alpha Omega or something like that,
Yeah.
and it's as a bass player, we're really lucky because I could just bring this pedal and go right into the PA and be fine. I You can't do that with guitar, like they're almost there with making it that small,
Yeah.
but like usually anything that's that small, you can't. It doesn't sound great, but um, but yeah, and so I'll use that, and I usually always have a backup,
Yeah.
like plumbed.
Mhm.
When I have like the big rig and I have the Axe FX and the SVT, I
Yeah.
also have that MXR pedal,
Yeah.
and I'll AB out to the front of house. The Axe FX gets one line, the Ampeg gets another line, and
Yeah.
those are the two we use for the show. If in the event anything happens to the rig because it's tube powered or something like that, that MXR is always being run with the mic cable going to it, and it's on battery power. So if for some reason everything dies,
Yeah.
I
You are better
I
power.
walk over. If I have it plugged in, I don't always have it plugged, but if I have it plugged into power supply, all I have to do is walk over and unplug it from the 9-volt power, and it'll
Yeah.
go. But a lot of times before I go on, I unplug just that one and let that one pedal just run on battery power for the set. And then I
Mhm.
plug it back in.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like a super fail safe where it'll just go.
Yeah.
It'll work.
Do you have any extra 9-volt batteries and 9-volt power supplies usually? Do you travel with those?
Yes.
Because those are very important to travel with. If you have to use 9-volt batteries, you just need to have 9-volt
So
batteries.
with these two pedals, I run them on batteries when I'm on tour.
Mhm.
The last Nita tour was the very first time I didn't use them. I did have I have like this little pocket where I could have had them set up.
Yeah.
And I had them there. But the last Nita tour, I just went straight into the Axe effects. Um, it was wireless into Axe effects. Like that was it. That was all I
Yeah.
did. But I had the channels built inside the Axe effects, like a dual channel.
Cool.
Um, but that's why the one thing I don't like about these basses that I was able to get from Ibanez is that they run off of batteries, and I don't like that.
It's
I
really hard to have. My very, very first bass that I was practicing with was active, and it would go out all the time, and I hate it because it'd be in the middle of a
It always
kick-off.
goes out at the worst time. It always goes out at the
Yeah.
worst time. It always goes
Yeah.
out, and I found out with Michael Graves that I'd be like in the middle of a set, and I'd be like, "Why the hell does my bass sound like shit?"
Mhm. Yeah, you can't hear
And
it,
it'd be
and you're
like,
like,
"What is going on?" And then after the set, you like take out the battery and like mother.
yeah, it's
No,
awful.
it's just unpredictable, and like it's not that it doesn't sound good when the batteries are there. It's just I hate that
It's
in
the
that moment
yeah,
that battery dies,
yeah.
and I
It's the
look like
same.
shit.
Yeah, and
Right?
it's the
No one
same.
sees the 9-volt. No one boos the fucking 9-volt.
It's
They
you.
boo
Yeah,
this dude. You know?
yeah.
Um, so even with guitars, I used to play EMGs and stuff. And with pedals, I've always had this issue. But for the longest time, since I've always been into pedals, I've
Mhm.
always made sure that I run a power supply. I have cables. Nowadays, I have as much of a fail-safe system as possible. I run things off of a one spot. Well, I always have like a one spot daisy chain that I can have as a backup, or I use like the MXR DC bricks, the ISO bricks. things like that, the voodoo pedal powers. It all depends. But anytime that I'm using a power supply and I'm
Mhm.
on tour and I'm using pedals,
Mhm.
every single pedal, to the best of my ability, will
Yeah.
have a brand new 9-volt battery in there. So that way, in case the power supply goes down and I don't have the backup, I
Yeah.
just unplug them all. And then as they are, they all have batteries in them already.
Yeah.
It does mess up the show, but that's the fail safe to the fail safe to the fail safe to the fail
Yeah.
safe. You know, like
If you're gonna work with an active bass, you need to make sure that you know that it's an active bass, and you know that it's probably gonna go out in the middle of your set.
right. And if you don't know, there's usually a little rectangular pocket on the back, right,
Yeah, usually there is. Yeah, and you just
like this,
yeah. So
and then inside there, boom.
boom. But yeah, it's not exactly the best thing to want to have to change in the middle of a song.
No, you just have to grab a second base.
So what did you talk with your friend about?
So when I met up with Hoogie,
Hmm.
I asked him a couple questions. One of them, but and we'll get into it. One of them had to do with why he became a tech, right?
Yeah.
Like when it comes to the bigger shows, so much of the show isn't just the band, so much of the show is also the crew. I know for me, it's very true. It's not just the people on the stage, it's the people behind the scenes. Um, and there's a lot of maintenance issues. You know, what my biggest tonal like thing about changing my strings, that's an everyday maintenance issue. One of our future guests, Mike Gallo from Agnostic Front, I was on tour with him as a guitar and bass tech for Prong,
Mm-hmm.
and I was changing strings every other day for
Hmm.
both of those bands, both of those guys in that band rather. But Mike Gallo, every single night on tour, he changed his strings right before sound check. Every single night, more than me. I
Yeah.
thought that was crazy.
Yeah,
I
I know
thought
some
I
people
thought
like
I
that.
changed my strings a lot by doing it every other show. He did his own strings every single night.
Yeah, I know a couple of bass players like that. That just I don't. I mean, that's their tone. That's what they like.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of it has to do with like metal and punk rock, right? We really do, with everyone going lower and lower and lower and everything. It really helps when you're playing again when it comes to your tone and EQing. As
Yeah.
a bass player, one of the things that I've always needed, so using the axe effects, I don't have a giant cab behind me.
Mhm.
So like I would always have to have the sound guy boost the high frequencies, and I think that's why we do that. You know, a lot of the times we have high frequencies in our
Yeah.
bass, so we
We
can
want that
hear it.
cut. We want it to cut through, and it's like once that cut d dampens a little bit, it's just like, oh, you want it back.
Yeah, well, it's your feedback too. You know, for me with Nita, that's very much been the case. Is that I need the high end for my
Hmm.
feedback,
Yeah.
because again, if you just boost those low frequencies in your bass tone, you just
Yeah.
get told to turn down.
Yeah.
So you know, so I got to talk to them about how he became a tech and how that approach came. And then I got to ask him about a couple of things, like night after night, certain responsibilities. Has he heard any complaints from anyone? What are
Hmm.
things that um, he has just learned over the years? And part of our discussion wound up getting into sponsorships and endorsements. And after we get done and we get back from my interview with Hoogie, we're gonna jump into that a little bit
Yeah.
more. So
Cool.
check it out, guys. All right, guys, I'm here with Hoogie from WB Gear and Shinedown Tech, and you used to work for Lamb of God. I know him
Yeah.
from WB Gear and Mental Cases and Intune Guitar Picks and all these amazing companies that have helped me along my path. So Hoogie is here, and he is gonna answer a few questions for us to give you guys some insight on just some of those shortcuts that I always talk about. You know, these things that take so long, and you don't realize what you have to do until you have to do it. And I was just talking right before we started recording this about how there's been so many moments where like you get to the stage and like something's happening and you're like in a panic, and that's when you figure out these crisis scenarios, right? And we were just riffing on that a little bit. And so with some of this, I wanted to dive into that. But the first question is, Mr. Hoogie, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure.
So you worked with a lot of awesome bands, big bands, small bands, everything,
Yeah,
right? We all come up in the ranks.
I've been doing
Um,
this for 23 years now, so
right. And without if there wasn't the vid going on, what would you be doing right now?
I'd probably be on the road with Shinedown right now, or somebody else, depending on the point they are with their record cycle. But yeah, definitely on the road. That's what I do about 8 months out of the year.
And so you're bass tech for Shinedown, right? Or you guitar
I've
tech
been
also?
no, I've been back bass teching for Eric since 2015. So yeah, 5 years now.
So my all the members of Nita Strauss totally made fun of me when we did that festival together.
Yeah.
Um and we got on the stage and Shinedown was headlining.
Mhm.
And I asked Eric, the bass player of Shinedown, if he could snag me one of Gavin Rosdale's guitar picks over from the guitar tech over there, because I didn't want to like just walk up to a guy and like he was sitting there talking with us and like they were like Nita was like, "Did you just ask the bass player of Shinedown for one of Gavin Rosdale's guitar picks?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I did. I did."
Interesting. That's pretty
but
funny.
dude, he was super cool, and he was like, "Yeah, of course, man. Like, I don't know, it's like one of the biggest bands when I was a kid. You know what I mean?
No, I get
Like,
it. Oh, dude, yeah, I get it. I definitely get
yeah,
it.
I was half fangirling, but they all totally made fun of me for that moment. But
I can see that. Yeah.
yeah, but like you're always on the job. You got to be able to be a kid once in a while, right?
I
We're
get
not
it.
we're not in this
Oh,
industry to grow up.
no,
Yeah.
we're all stuck at
you
15,
know,
right?
right, yeah, it's stuck at 15, 13, 14, anywhere in the
Yeah.
teens for sure, 20 teen, old enough to
I
drink teen. That's about
yeah,
it.
that's about it. Yeah.
All right. So as a professional guitar and bass tech, did you first get involved with any instruments as a musician? And if so, to what degree? And then how did that ultimately lead to you becoming a tech?
Well, I was never a musician. I fell into it hanging out with a band when I was graduating high school, 17. Back in Canada, this band that I know, they ended up signing a record deal, and me and the guitar player were friends, and they took me on the road.
What
And
band was
from
that?
there, they were called Flybanger at the time. I was good friends with the singer and the uh, the guitar player. And yeah, one thing led to another.
So you didn't ever play an instrument like in that
No,
regard?
no. The guitar player's like, hey, started showing me some stuff, how to restring and work on his guitars and stuff like that. And yeah,
I
I
have
get,
had a whole bunch of guitar techs that don't know how to play guitar. Isn't
yeah,
that funny? Isn't that funny? Yeah, and
yeah.
drum techs that like, they know how to hit the drums. They know how
Yeah,
to tune the drums. They know how to change the heads. They know how to, but don't expect them to start doing blast beats.
yeah. No, I get it, man. And 23 years, I've made a career of it.
Wow, yeah, it's a long time. It's a long time. I've been
Yeah,
playing guitar for I'm gonna be 37, so 24 years I've been playing
yeah,
guitar. And I myself, I started off as a tech too.
yeah.
The reason why I asked you this question is because when I got my first guitar, one of the very first things I did before I knew how to play a single thing was I completely took it apart.
Ripped
Like
it
my
apart.
dad was a car guy. I did everything
Yeah.
but disconnect the solder, right?
No, I get it.
And then over the years that just evolved. And
Yeah.
then I actually started touring for Darrow Chemical Company with the guys from Michael Graves. Um,
Okay.
yeah, it was their like other band. I was their tech. I was their guitar and bass tech.
Yeah.
And like I had to learn 12 songs in a pinch because the guitar player had to leave because of like crisis family emergency. And I just learned the song, and that's how I started touring. Like I
Yeah.
had always played shows, but I had
Yeah.
never like toured the US. I just
Yeah.
did like the local tri-state area circuit.
Yeah.
Um and yeah, and so like that's pretty cool. And like the last couple guitar techs I had, like my buddy Drew Stage Crew.
Yeah.
Um, he like he would take classes. I think like when Nita went to hire him or for one of his gigs, he's not a guitar player. He didn't know how to do like Floyd
Yeah.
Rose's. I think he had to do like a Monsters of Rock cruise.
Yeah.
And he just like went to Ibanez and they like sat him down. They like showed him the ropes, showed him everything, how to do it, and banged it out. You could be
Yeah.
very methodical if you know how to just turn your screws.
Oh no, and just it takes time, right? I'm always learning, always evolving. That's just it. Don't go into thinking you know everything. Gears always changing. You know, rigs. Digital guitars are always changing. Everything.
What was it like being a tech in the beginning, right? Like so before rigs.
Like in the beginning, the dude I worked with, he had a rectifier and a cabinet. He had a couple guitars. I think 3 guitars. I think he had 2 tunings, but pretty simple pedal board. It was like a wah, a tuner, and something else.
Right, right.
It wasn't anything crazy, and I learned how to work on his. It was like a couple Les Pauls, and I think there was a Explorer, and bass rig was pretty simple too. It was like just a Ampeg rig and cable. Dudes didn't have wirelesses back then.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Unless you were Angus.
Yeah, but yeah, it was pretty simple. We went on the road, made like $200 a week and a meal at Denny's.
Yeah,
That
dude,
was
the meals at Denny's. That's the punk rock days right there.
Yeah. You get $8 budget. Don't go over $8. You won't get it. You're paying it.
My very first tour, the one that I was just talking about, I got paid in a lump sum for the tour,
Yeah.
but it equated out to $7 a day.
Yeah.
$7 a day. Um, it was
You
fun, but there was some Denny's meals. I got news for
Yeah. Oh yeah.
you.
Oh yeah. For $7 a day, you can send a kid on tour.
You can though. I mean, it was so, dude. And back then, I used to smoke cigarettes, and so it was like cigarettes are food, and it was like, how about we split cigarettes, and then we like split some like a cheeseburger or something,
Yeah.
like we'll just pitch in together. But
Yeah.
so
Crazy.
being on the road all the time, right? You tour a lot,
Yeah.
a whole lot. I've seen
Yeah.
some of your tour logs, and it looks like you're just never even home, right?
Yeah.
Um,
That's part of it. I've been fortunate. I've been to 59 countries.
Good for you, man.
Yeah.
Good for you. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Lamb of God, they took us everywhere around the world.
And what years did you work with them?
2009, 2014. Yeah.
Word.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, that's right around somewhere. I think like 2012, 2011, 2012 is when I started working with WB Gear and
Yeah.
started and learned about you, and because you handle everything like personally yourself with that, and that's always
Yeah.
been so awesome of you, to put so much extra work on top of
Yeah.
all this other stuff, right? So you're
A lot of people don't realize like the WB Gear thing. That's my side gig. This is my main gig is working with bands and touring with bands. That's where I make my my bulk of my income. But the WB Gear thing's a side thing, and it's been great. It's
so good. It's
I
so
get
good.
to it works because I'm on these stages and I'm always meeting new artists like you, and from there, being
And you
able
take care
to
of a lot of people,
Yeah.
man. You
Yeah.
guys take care of a lot of people. I've
We've
been
been very
nothing but
fortunate.
grateful.
Yeah.
I've been
Yeah.
nothing but grateful.
Yeah. And it's there. It's like, look, currently we work with 10 brands. If you want to use them, they're there. If you don't, cool. Support the ones you use. And that's what we tell artists, And, of course you have to qualify at a certain level. We don't just, hand out everything. You got to be doing something. You got to be active. You got to have some social media presence.
For sure. But all you got to do is be active in the right
Yeah.
ways, because I'll
Yeah.
tell you, like, I wasn't a touring artist like I am now at that
No.
time. You know what I mean? Like, I was doing stuff, I was hustling, and
But you were hustling. You were posting things. You were making posts. You were, interacting with people. So that's a giant part of it. You've got somewhat of a following on your social media. I love, some of these dudes, they'll message me and they got like 100 people following them and they nothing on their social media. And then they get offended because it's hard for me to justify, for these brands to justify doing, things.
Well, all these brands are really generous too. Like, there's
Yeah.
some really awesome discounts. I can't afford
Yeah.
everything, my
Yeah.
wish list is super long,
Yeah.
like every musician, but
Yeah.
yeah, dude, I'll tell you, getting guitar picks with my name on it, right? And it was because of In Tune with
Yeah.
WB Gear. That was like the first moment in all those
Oh yeah.
years where I was like, I got this first bag of picks and I was like, I made it.
Dude, I
Like,
know. It's
I
like the
swear
coolest
to
thing.
God, man.
That's been one of the funnest aspects of the job, is being able to, help artists give them their custom pick, or SIT strings and gauges in their sizes, or
Yeah.
oh man, I used to have to buy 2 packs because I'd only like to use this, and I'd only like to use these ones out of this pack, and then I'd waste. Yeah, that's been one of the coolest parts about it. Yeah.
I've been a string whore my whole life in that regard. It's always been, playing
Yeah.
extended range instruments,
Yeah.
in crazy tunings in the way music is nowadays.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, you always sometimes you need like a super thick B string or
Yeah.
super, thick G string because you tune down for this one song, this one time.
Yeah.
Um, so with that though, so on that the subject of strings, because this I think would be very important for bass. Um, what is the hardest thing to maintain with bass? Would you say it has to do a lot with
I mean,
strings and tension as you go throughout and tour? And when you take a bass through 59 countries, right?
yeah.
What is like the thing that you
I
like need
just
to check?
just have the proper tools to work on it. I'm consistently looking at the instrument and checking every moving spot, everywhere there's a screw. That's part of my job, right?
Right.
Making sure the neck is, you know, the proper, action. That's part of the job. Going through the instrument and taking 30 minutes to sit there and, uh, if your dude likes, fresh strings, all of that's personal preference, and it's different from guy to guy. Some dudes like, really fresh strings for certain songs. Some dudes only play the top two strings and you can get away with only changing them. you know it's
Yeah.
it, it really is different, but one of the main things, going over the parts and pieces of that instrument, checking them, you know wiggling
I
the strap locks, checking the bridge, checking those screws,
I tell
cleaning it
all of
down.
my I tell all of my students that you have to realize that the hardest part about like playing a stringed instrument, especially bass, because
Yeah.
it vibrates, right? It's literally made to vibrate. So if you can imagine, anything that can turn is
Yeah.
going to move.
Yeah. And
It's
then you get to a level at this, you're up on stage rocking out with that bass for however many songs, and then it goes back into a vault. What's that vault doing, or what's that case doing? It's going on a truck driving down the road. What's that bass doing? It's still vibrating.
it's
So
bouncing, bouncing.
even though you know you're not playing it on stage and it's been sitting in a case for a day, if you're traveling, go through those parts and pieces, check out those nuts and bones, and everything, right?
Yeah, I had
And
issues
even,
even
sorry,
with amps. I was gonna
yeah,
say I had issues even
yeah,
with amps because of that scenario. That's why I bought this road case for mental
yeah,
cases. Dude, I couldn't even like afford it at the time, but I still
yeah,
bought it
yeah,
because I was touring, right? And
yeah.
like I play tubed amps. I have a tubed SVT 2
and
Pro here and then
and
6505. That thing just goes in the trailer and just bounces.
and that's what I was just going to say. Even like your pedal boards, check those inputs, outputs, everything, dude. It's all that's half of it.
It
That's half
literally
of
gets
it.
stomped on for a living.
Yeah, and you don't want to be up there flailing around. Well, that's what you need to do.
So what's the biggest complaint that you've like come across in 23 years, right? Bass specific, because I know you do guitar and bass, and some of this cross platforms too. So like,
Man,
it is what it is. But what's the
no,
biggest complaint?
no major complaint. Just like I said, every dude's different. Don't go into a gig, or don't go, you know, you're not like the other guy. So there's a learning curve with each guy. In regards to me as a tech, that there's a learning curve for. It's going to take a few shows to get it down with the way you like this here, the way you like. It's not just about playing, you know.
Right.
Where do you get your water from? Where do you get your towels? Where's your set list on the stage? Where's your picks? Some dudes like their picks on their headstocks. It's different from dude to dude. And you introduce little things that you've learned along the way to a dude, and they think that's cool, and then they start doing it. But yeah, it's definitely don't walk in thinking you already know that dude, because you don't.
Right.
Yeah,
Very true. When I
you,
the first tour when I teched, I knew those guys, right?
yeah,
Recently I got a gig teching for Prong for Tommy Victor.
yeah,
And the first time we strung up his guitars, we strung up the 4 guitars he was taking on tour. He did 2 and I did 2. And we did them right then and there. And I, like I know my way around a guitar. So I have no issue with popping all 6 strings off of a Floyd Rose
yeah,
and restringing it with 6 strings and turning and twisting every single screw, nut, and bolt to get it right back into spot without any fret, right?
yeah.
But that gives some players anxiety, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Some dudes are
Yeah.
like, you will only take one string off at a time. You will
Yep.
only like, dude. Yeah, there's some dudes like, yeah,
I
yeah.
had to do that. I had to do that. I had to learn, right? You ask questions.
Do not use this chemical or cleaner or, dude. It's different from guy to guy. Ask the questions. And then it beats having a
And
shitty
learn
show.
fast.
Yeah, and
Ask the
that's the other thing.
questions once and learn
Yeah,
fast. And
yeah,
it's that way you have room to ask another, I always say.
yeah.
You know?
But yeah, definitely.
Well, man, thank you so much. Those are the only questions that I have for you right now. Hopefully, you have your own podcast that
Yes.
you're also
Well,
doing right now, right? What's it called?
it's called the Mark and Hoogie Show. Me and a buddy of mine who was in radio back home, we started it when this whole pandemic started, and it's been pretty cool. We've gotten to interview dudes from like Hatebreed, Shinedown. We've had Picasso, who's a shoe artist, on there. We've had Bob Terrell, amazing tattoo artist, legendary. So yeah, it's been pretty cool. It's we're gonna keep going with it. Yeah, have fun with it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
I love it. I love all of this. I consider like this whole pandemic thing, right? I consider it like the second coming of Napster for the music industry.
it just
And
everybody's getting creative in different ways, which is
well,
pretty cool.
they have to, dude. Right when I
Yeah,
turned 18, Napster hit the internet, and like album sales dipped. It's
yeah,
like right when I could have toured, every record company just tanked.
yeah.
Like
I get it.
that's what happened, right? And so now I feel like we're doing this. There's very many artists who are getting very creative. I see bands like Trivium playing video games with their fans. Like the one thing I love, I think, with this pandemic is even though it brought us apart, it brought a lot of the fans a lot closer and more
Yeah,
intimate with the bands,
no,
between
I get it, bro.
Patreons and everyone
Yeah,
has to interact now. It's kind of
interact a little
cool.
more.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
it's
been
kind of
pretty
cool.
cool.
It's a
Definitely.
lot of extra hard work, Everyone's working hard for it, but
But you know what? Like, if it was easy, everybody'd be doing it.
well, that's for sure. You
That's
know,
like any job in the world. If it was easy, anyone would do it.
yeah, for sure, for
You got
sure.
to work for what you got.
Um, what was the craziest bass rig that you had to assemble?
Craziest.
Yeah, like biggest, or more most complex. Either or, it could be tiny and complex, or
I mean, like
just
like
too big.
usually like it's like a clean dirty combo where a lot of dudes don't like their, like, for instance, this guy and a couple other dudes that I've worked with. This guy is an Eric from Shinedown. He doesn't like to affect his clean bass tone.
I like this.
So when he wants to add a dirty tone, he kicks on. We actually have a whole nother rig, a guitar rig, Mojo Tone Deacon. So he uses Ampeg SVT 7 Pro for his clean, and the only pedals we have in front of that is an octave, the bass whammy pedal.
All right, the blue one or whatever.
It's the blue one. He uses that. He's got his tuner on his pedal board and a Boss, or sorry, a Dunlop, the white wah.
Right.
Yeah.
I was using one of them for guitar because
Yeah.
it's optical, right? You just go up to it and you
Yeah.
just hit it.
Yeah. And he only uses it in like interludes and stuff. He uses the octave more through, some of the songs, but the wah doesn't use it
See,
very much out in the show.
I'm really happy I asked that because I love that. So when I started part as I said before we started recording here, part of the reason why I want to do this is to let people know the things that you have to learn along the way. And one of the things I learned along the way was the best way to get the most killer bass tone is to have 2 signal lines.
Yep. 2.
Right? One for lows, one for highs, or one for cleans and one for dirties, however you want to do it. But have two lines. And like the first Nita Strauss tour I did, I had the Ampeg go to an 8x10 on stage, and I A-B'd my signal. I always use a comp gate, always on bass, a comp gate.
In the front,
And then I A-B'd the signal. I sent one to the Axe Effects, which was my distorted bass tone, and that was the more high end.
Yeah.
And then the on stage with the cabinet, the low end with the Ampeg with the tubes, getting that punch.
And
then the sound guy just mixes it.
Yeah. And whenever you kick on a distortion pedal on the front of a bass rig, it just sucks up that low end.
Right.
You just lose that tone, that growl. So add to it. Don't take away from it. Add to it.
Right. And I do a similar thing for guitar too, where I'm a psycho with my guitar tone. I always have my bass up like 75%, and then my mids and treble just below, either in between 9 and 12, whatever sounds right for the room. And that seems like super bass heavy, but I throw on a tube screamer and a compressor with that, and that sucks up my low end. And that's why I put that distortion on, is literally to suck up and just take that the punch away from that low end, so it's still kind of there, but it's not all muddy, right? And that's the same thing with bass too. Like you never want to have too much distortion on the low end, because it just gets lost, you
lose it. But that's pretty much what we do. And definitely a compressor on the front end. It just makes it a lot more level when you're going back and forth from a pick to a finger. Not jumping out and killing your sound guy. He doesn't have to chase you as much.
What's your preferred bass tone? Is it fingers or picks?
It's all for the song.
Right.
And the end of the day, it's all for the song.
All right. Yeah, because some guys can. I'm a pick guy. I play with my fingers when I need to round down my tone.
Yeah.
Right. And when I need that sharpness. I was just curious because, dude, I grew up with like bass players like Rex Brown, so there was like a specific bass tone.
Tone.
Yeah. Jason Newsted, Rex Brown, like that was
working
like the bass tone.
Working for this dude, he goes back and forth. I'd say it's like 40 fingers, 60 pick. But
word, that's good.
Yeah. He goes back and forth throughout the series show.
One of my other guests was Killian Duarte from Scale to Summit. That dude's all fingers. That dude's all fingers. That dude could I just don't even get it. He does crazy stuff, but he can play with his fingers and make any tone he wants.
Anything.
Yeah.
And some dudes can do that. It's crazy. Right. But yeah.
Well, thank you so much, man.
Thanks for having me.
And your podcast is called Mark and Hoogie?
Yeah, the Mark and Hoogie Show. Check it out, markandhoogieshow.com, wbgear.com. You can check that out. We work with a lot of different brands, from SIT strings into guitar picks, mental case. There's a whole bunch more there. Bestronix Pro Audio if you're looking for cables. But check all that out, wbgear.com. There's an inquiry form you can fill out. And
And I suggest everyone at least takes a look at it and all those companies, because I promise you, I've been so super happy like forever. As a hardworking musician, it's good to feel like, I don't know, other people want you to play your music, you know?
Dude, for sure. And dude,
It's really nice.
like you said, like the picks, that's a pretty cool thing. And they don't have to be just for stage, they can be for whatever.
Merch product.
Yeah,
It's great
merch
merch product.
product,
Yeah.
gifts, whatever. Yeah, they're people really eat that stuff up.
Yeah, because it's fun, right? Like for years I use guitar picks as business cards.
Yep.
You know, how many business cards just wind up still in the pants pocket and go through the wash?
You can
And
still
how many
use it.
guitar picks go right to the nightstand?
No, it's true. But yeah, check it out, wbeergear.com. Anything else? Yeah, the Mark and Hoogie Show for the podcast.
Thank you so much for taking your time. You said you
Dude,
were really busy with the studio, and I appreciate it so very much. So
thank you for
thank you,
having
and
me.
I hope I get to have you on here again. We could talk some more
Dude,
smack.
anytime, hit me up.
All right, absolutely. Thank you so much, Hoogie.
Thanks, buddy. Be
All
safe.
right. Bye. So
That was
Hoogie's
awesome.
such a great guy, man. I love getting to sit down and chat with him. He's so nice, man. Canadians, they're too nice, eh? They're too nice.
Eh?
They're too nice, eh? Hoogie is definitely responsible for me feeling like an accomplished musician across all of these trials, tribulations, and sacrifices that we do go across in this industry. One of the greatest things that we get to feel is when people give back to us. Most of our job as a musician is to go to a show and perform a live show and give you our heart and soul. And we have to sacrifice so much for that. And so when you find amazing angels such as Hoogie and all of the people at WB Gear in all of those amazing companies, they give back. And when I was on tour with Nita, I was able to get an Ibanez endorsement, right? And we kind of talked about this a little bit, but like as you upgrade and as you go through gear, you really have to love the gear that you play. And when you find out what gear you love, then you use that gear. And then there's several different ways between social media, booking tours, and all this other stuff on how to get attention out there to the world that you're using this gear. And then you can hit up these companies and get these endorsements. Now, if I wasn't doing something such as Anita Strauss tour, I doubt that Ibanez would have hooked me up with any bases. But
Yeah.
they did because it was the right move. It just happened to also be the company that I have liked.
Yeah.
One of the things we want to touch on real quick before we close up shop here tonight is short-term endorsements versus long-term endorsements.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of this episode has been us talking about strings.
hmm Yeah, and that's a short-term endorsement, your picks and your strings and the little things that are easier kind of to get endorsements, but they make I mean, if you get a pick endorsement, which is really awesome, even though they're not that expensive to get your own picks, if you get a pick endorsement, that's your name on that pick and you can give them to everyone. It's your business card basically. And
Did
so
you
that,
use a pick for guitar, right?
yeah, I did for guitar. Actually, this is my pick box. I've got tons of picks in here.
I
And I think I have a.
part of
Oh,
my
look, it's a
tone.
Gavin Rossdale pick.
All right.
I got that from Takumi
So,
or A.
so I don't know.
I know.
There's a great story inside that
Uh-huh.
interview.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, I love that. Um, I wonder if we're gonna keep that in. We'll see. We'll see. Um, yeah,
Anyways, but
I
yeah,
love that. I
but not just picks and strings, but cable endorsements. You can get cable
Oh
endorsements,
God, they're so good. It's so good.
and
Part
yeah,
of my tone is my pick. One of my friends, that same kid from that noise project I talked about, one of the things that we decided early on was like, when you get a pick, right? And then you play the shit out of it, and then you wear it down and it gets all rounded. And now all of a sudden
yeah,
you're like, man, it plays so smooth, it plays so great. And then you lose that pick. And then you have to go and get another pick. And it doesn't sound like that until you wear it all the way down again.
yeah, yeah. But
I
what's
made an
funny?
active decision
Uh-huh.
to never use a worn down pick. So as my picks start to wear down, I just I give it away, I throw it, or whatever, I put it in a pile for giveaways.
Yeah.
I use brand new picks daily.
Well, that's
Um,
also a tone thing.
yeah, it's
Part
about
of tone.
tone and feel. It was also about playability. Is that
Yeah,
I would
playability.
be when I would lose the when
Look.
I'd snip the tip, I'd miss the string. So I just yeah, it was a lot to do with tone and it was a lot to do with that. So short-term endorsements are great, such as regular maintenance items, cables, picks, strings, um, and and like tool endorsements, right? Like the Big
Truck
Ben's nut sauce
endorsements.
and stuff. Or um you're unfortunately you're not really able to get endorsements for certain maintenance items such as like tubes. Like you'd have to be like, Eddie Van Halen to get
Uh,
a tube endorsement, for Christ's sakes. There's certain stuff that you're just not going to get.
but you
Or
can get
it's
an amp
it's not
endorsement
often to
that
get.
has, yeah.
Um,
Um,
and but then there's the long-term stuff, right? Is as you're going through and you're playing the instruments that you've bought, that you've built up, that you've found, that you love, that you exploit, then when the situations and the stars line up, you got to know when to strike. I was
yeah,
really, really, I've loved Ibanez as a company my whole life, but as I said, I wouldn't have got that deal if it wasn't for the
yeah.
way things lined up. When I was on tour in 2015, I met Matt from Plan 916.
Mhm.
Um, he's given me the pickups. That whole me wanting to get away from batteries thing, he has single handedly helped me out and made pickups for every single one of my guitars and helped me sculpt this tone
Mhm.
across all these platforms. And but like he wasn't Seymour Duncan. He
Yeah.
was this guy that was on a similar level to me. And like this is a great time. You know, it's about to be 2021.
Mhm.
It will be 2021 when this airs, and the world is digital,
Yeah.
and the world is boutique and entrepreneurs. Gibson isn't the only guitar maker anymore. Neither is Fender.
Yeah.
Like Seymour Duncan
There are
isn't the
lots
only
of
pickup maker
options.
anymore. You know,
Yeah.
Boss isn't the only, and Boss and MXR aren't the only people who make pedals. Now there's so many companies, and
Yeah.
everybody's starting up. So you can reach out to companies. I'll tell you, um, I bought my first mono case. I think I got it. I think I sent an Instagram
Mhm.
direct message
Mhm.
to mono creators and got a discount on my bass because I had something that I was doing. I had these tours and I needed to travel and had to take a Greyhound bus back and forth
Yeah.
to meet up
Wanted
with
a
these
double.
guys.
Did you get
And
like the double one? Double
well, I
guitar?
was taking a Greyhound bus back and forth to Pittsburgh like constantly. I was just like it was like the equivalent of a red eye. It was dirt cheap and it was just like I go to sleep and I wake up and I'm in fucking Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Um but I sent him a DM.
Mhm.
If you have something going on and you need it and
Mhm.
you love it, that's how you approach sponsorships. And so we're going to get a little bit more into that later on. We'll get more in depth into that. But for all aspiring musicians, check out WB Gear. They have a great list of those regularly maintenance items that we all could use. I know no one's really touring right now, but an Instagram post goes really far nowadays, man.
But you always need new strings, so
Always
always
need
need new
new
picks.
strings. With the pick endorsement, that was the very first thing, and I've said it over and over again, and I will continue to say it because it was like that first mountainous accomplishment for
Yeah.
me was having a guitar pick that has my name on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Having
I never needed a guitar pick because I don't use guitar picks for my bass,
um
but I have a kind of like an artist deal with DR Strings. So whenever I do need bass strings, which hardly ever, I just call up my dude and he sends me some bass strings and
where I live right now, they're not there anymore, but DR Strings
yeah,
Forever were
yeah,
made at 7 Palisades
yeah,
Avenue
yeah,
in
yeah. I think
Emerson, New Jersey.
yeah, my
That's
friend,
across
my
the
guys,
train tracks from where I'm sitting right now.
yeah, my guy is in New Jersey,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah.
They moved. They
Uh-huh.
moved. I don't know where.
It's
But
cool.
I used to use in my tonal search. That was one of my things. I used to mix and match strings and stuff. And one
Yeah,
time I wasn't able to get the strings that I needed at any guitar store in the area, so I
yeah,
just drove straight to 7 Palisades Avenue, and I knocked on the door, and I was like, and they're like, "Hello." Because they're not like a real factory. It was like a small building. It's
yeah,
a lot smaller of a production than you'd think.
yeah,
And
and hand wound.
and I was just like, yeah, man, I love your strings. I use your strings. No one has them for sale. Can I buy some here? And the dude brought me in the back and handed me a couple of strings and gave me a tour and then sent me off on my fucking little way.
They're
That's two
awesome.
F bombs.
And that's actually who when I go to NAM, that's who I go under is DR. So that's another thing when you want to go to NAM, but not that it's going to happen this year, but probably next year. You have to have a badge. So these companies who can endorse you and get you in, they give you the badge and you're able to go mingle with other companies. And that's another, unfortunately, we won't be able to do it this year, but when you get into going to like
Yeah, I guess NAM's canceled, right?
festivals. Yeah, NAM's canceled this year, but there might be some more festivals coming up in the fall. Usually there are, but guitar festivals are great places to go, and you get they'll give you free T-shirts and stuff, and just talk to the people at the booths and tell them what you're up to, and if they feel like they've got a good
Communication is
vibe with you,
key.
or
Like
yeah,
I just recently got a Neck Illusions endorsement for the Riddler guitar and some of my other seven strings. And I'm going to do something with these basses too. And so, guys, so many of my endorsements start with just like A, know the product, B, use the product, C, if you like the product, send a DM.
hmm yeah,
Even if that person, so with Neck Illusions, the person who runs their social media is not the person I needed to talk to make an order. I just wanted to buy,
hmm
I just wanted to buy these things for my guitar neck. I sent a DM to their social media. They're like, we don't do this, but here's where you can go. And so
yeah,
I sent that email, and this guy was like, oh my God, yes, I'd love to give you some. And then he made these mock ups for me, and I checked them out. I was like, sweet, where do I send the billing information? He's like, oh, no, 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 no. You are a new Neck Illusions artist. And I was like, no shit.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, you'd be surprised. I mean, if you have something going on, these companies want to get their products in your
we
hand.
all need the same help, right? And
Yeah.
so many of the companies are people like you and me,
Mhm.
who start things up. Look at everything that Periphery and Abasi and everything that they're doing with all of these companies, right? Like they've all started up their own guitars and pedals and amp companies and
And the
plugins
key,
and get good drums.
yeah.
Like
Another key element is word of mouth. You know somebody that is with that company, and they can probably pass if you have a friend that's endorsed with a company, you can and you're doing something, and you know that you can also impress that company. Have them send your information. Um,
it sucks sometimes. It's really hard. Like I didn't want to. Obviously, Josh and Nita are like this with Ibanez. Because of that, I also didn't want to ask them.
mhm,
The reason why I did is because I knew that what I was asking actually was going to make the show better and that they would also think that. So
exactly.
again, it's not only just about who you know and what you need, but making sure that all those nexus points line up, that it really is the right decision. Trust me, if it's the right decision, you'll get the gig, you'll get the
Yeah.
deal. If
Yeah.
it's not, if you don't get it, it's because something in there was missing.
Yeah. Exactly.
And but yeah, you start off small. If you rep small companies, like I got a Crank amp endorsement. I like won it at this Battle of the Bands. I got, like I got an endorsement for Crank heads.
hmm
I never used them. It's not something I sought out. Um, when I got the endorsement, I looked at their products. I tried out a couple of the amps,
hmm
and it wasn't me. And I wanted to love it because Dimebag,
Yeah.
right? They had it. They had
Exactly.
a Dimebag head,
Yeah.
and
And that's why they endorse artists that are doing things, because that's where you go when you want to buy something. You look at your favorite artist and what they play, and you listen to whatever music that you like and you're trying to emulate or that you want to sound like. That's the gear that you go towards. So those,
Dimebag was different. Crank was his first like tubed head, right? He was a solid state guy, and Crank made the Crankenstein, which was like that Dimebag head. Um, I'll tell you, I hated it.
yeah.
I hated it. I don't love Dimebag for his tone. Like that's not why I love him. I
Yeah.
love other guitar players for their tone, right? I love Dimebag for everything that he was, and I to the point where I named my son after him. My son's name is James Darrell Dean.
Oh,
Um,
Cool.
Rita sent me pics and some other stuff. I just found it. I have um, a calendar in a little like a 3x5 Pantera prep like promo photo with some dime pics that she sent me for my 30th birthday because I named my son James Darrell
That's
Dean
awesome.
and she was told about it.
That's awesome.
Um, but yeah, I got this endorsement for this thing and it didn't make sense, so I didn't pursue it. I didn't waste my money on the amp. I didn't
Yeah.
waste my money and time on the post. If
Mhm.
you don't feel it, you're not going to do your job. So again, it comes down
Yeah.
to you actually liking the product
Yeah.
and putting your own money out to buy something,
Yeah.
right? I reached out to Ibanez for these two BTBs because back in the day, I traded seven string guitars for this
Mhm.
one 5 string bass that is used in a lot of my promos, the one with the typo negative sticker that I used for Michael Graves and all these other basses, all these other gigs for the Independents. All my gigs that I like was touring as a bass player. I used this bass. I sacrificed seven strings to get this bass. I traded them in with no money. I got ripped off on the deal, but I don't care. I sacrificed to get that thing, and then I used the hell out of it, and I loved it, and I still have it.
Mhm.
But I broke the headstock off in a music video.
Great.
Yep, I broke the headstock off in a music video because the strap ripped.
Oh my gosh.
Not because the strap pin pulled out,
Mhm.
because the strap itself
Uh,
ripped. And
well, straps.
I'm not gonna say who the company was, um,
Straps
because
are another endorsement that you can have as well.
oh yes, and it
I
was
have
an
an
endorsement strap.
yeah, I have an endorsement strap from the guy that made Stevie Ray Vaughan's straps,
That's awesome.
Christian Brooks. Yeah, and there's actually a YouTube video you can watch him. I pick out everything and make it for him. And the cloth or the fabric that I use for it is the same print that Billy Gibbons used for his straps that the guy made, but mine was red and his was gold. It's pretty cool.
Sweet.
So yeah, that's the
Yeah,
stuff
it
I.
was a strap endorsement,
Mhm.
and the company used uh, all synthetic materials because they're a
Yeah,
vegan company,
yeah,
and that mixed with how I sweat on stage,
yeah. It didn't work, huh?
it did not work. I ripped right through it.
Um,
I've known several people who have had no problems. I can tell you that I loved the strap,
uh,
but the piece that held it on to the bass and the guitar, it has to be leather. It
yeah.
has to be, or it has to be some synthetic shit that isn't gonna rip. Because
Mhm.
um, yeah, I went through 4 straps
Yeah.
um in the same exact spot,
Yeah. And the
and the last one was
do they make a
losing a
strap
headstock.
lock endorsement?
Well, you
I
can still.
actually, I changed my strap locks to these guys this last tour.
What
My
the
like regular
Schallers?
strap locks to these little the rubber ones because for some reason my strap locks kept coming out of my bass. And so
Yeah, no, it's not.
on
It's not for some
recommendation.
reason. So what happens is so I could show you like on this.
Mhm.
This usually when you have a regular strap pin, your strap is
Yeah,
right up
right
against
there.
it. When
Hmm.
you put a strap lock on, you'll notice when you put a strap lock on, you're moving that
Oh
away.
yeah,
So
totally.
now it has more room.
Hmm.
On all of my guitars, on this horn, I move the strap lock to the back. Now, if you look, I also have that little fender rubber, right?
Yeah.
So I use these Schaller strap locks,
Uh,
but they squeak.
okay.
So
So
on my basses, though, I use these rubber
your double
washers. I
straps.
just found out when I wasn't on tour that with these things squeaking, that if
Yeah.
I put that rubber
Uh,
washer in between,
it doesn't squeak.
it's super quiet. It doesn't squeak.
Nice.
But I love these Schallers. They were just the first strap locks that I used. I
Yeah.
bought my first set of strap locks, and they were Schallers, and it took me a long time to realize like how to use them, especially with like rounded edge guitars and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but I also loved them because when I bought them, it said on them "Made in West Germany,"
Oh,
and I was like, "Whoa, that
so
hasn't been
cool.
around for so long," like. And so like some of these strap locks that I have, like I love that about them. I love that
Yeah.
they're like made in this country that doesn't exist anymore. Like it's so I kind of like that. But yeah, like those little rubber washers
Mm.
on all the Anita Strauss tours with these BTBs, that's all I use.
Yeah, and it's
It's
so weird. I
amazing.
never thought these would work. And
Dude, they work so good.
yeah,
It
they're
works
super
so
tender.
good.
Yeah,
Dude,
I
that guy
think
should get a Nobel Peace Prize because that
really should. I mean,
it
it's just a
doesn't
piece
cost
of
shit. It doesn't cost
yeah.
shit, and
It's
I promise you, I've used all the strap locks on
yeah,
the planet.
yeah,
Those are the most effective. Those are the most cost effective. They work the most.
yeah. And they come in two colors. You
Yep,
can get
the red and
orange,
blue, black.
black.
Yep. I did have to buy 2 packs of them. That's why I had the red ones available because
Yeah,
I'll only use the black ones like
yeah,
5.
yeah.
Um,
I think the orange is kind of annoying, to be
yeah,
honest.
I
But
wonder why, but like, yeah, it's
whatever.
cool though. Like, so yeah, guys, those are like long term versus term stuff. You just got to make sure that the pieces line up. You know what I mean? Um,
Know
use
the right people,
products that
the right
you love
questions.
first. You know, how do you find out what you love? Experiment
Go to Guitar Center, if they're
with your
if you're
mask.
with your mask, and get one of the dudes to or the girls to come and give you all this different gear and set you up. And
No, I know, and don't feel
that's how I
embarrassed
chose.
about asking for the guitar on the top. That's what you're supposed
No,
to do. Just walk in
yeah,
and like, I don't care.
I want that. I want that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
pretend like you. I don't care if you just parked the station wagon outside. Pretend like you walked in there owning a Ferrari,
yeah,
and then just grab the most expensive guitar on the wall and find out if it's any good.
yeah. Find out if you like it. Find out if that's your tone. You may not even like that tone, and
I've
then
grabbed some of the most
pay
expensive
4 grand.
instruments. Yeah, I've grabbed some of the most expensive instruments off the wall
You don't like it.
and think they suck.
Yeah.
You know, there's a
When I
reason why I play Ibanez's. I worked at Guitar Center. I could play all of those things. I
yeah.
still didn't buy a Les Paul. you know.
Yeah, the way that I chose my hard key is I went in and I went through all the amps that were there and I said, okay, and I needed one. I had to buy one, right? And I said, okay, I want that one. And that's how I ended up with it,
Yeah.
You go in and you try them out and you figure out what feels good and and don't worry about like people listening to you at guitar. If you're afraid to go into Guitar Center to play, like just get over it. Like nobody cares.
Yeah, dude, trust me.
Everybody's in there playing
Yep.
something. So it doesn't matter. Just go in there with
You're
as much
just like
confidence.
everyone else who walks in that door.
Yeah,
You
just
know.
go in there and enjoy.
Yeah,
It's
turn
like
up
a
the amp
big
as loud as you want. Who
Mhm,
cares? You know.
exactly.
Let them get everyone get a little excitement in their life.
Exactly. Yeah.
Without those Michael J. Foxes of the world, how would we know what the limits of speakers are? You know.
Exactly. Well, awesome. So this was a great show with lots of. I mean, we touched on gear. We obviously can go even further into gear in this topic, but
We got
it,
a lot of ways to go when it comes to gear. I
yeah,
just especially with sitting down with Hoogie, I think that a lot of the points that we were able to bring up today were right in line with really important avenues that people need to think about because shortly after picking up your instrument, you need to figure out what kind of gear you need. You
yeah,
just you and oddly enough, B Gear's motto is the gear you need.
the gear.
Um, and because it's all regularly maintenance stuff, like not all of it, but a lot of it. Like it's this stuff you need, and you know, you do need strings. You don't need a new bass.
Yeah,
You might need a new bass. But
but
more often than not, we want these other things, and we
yeah,
need
but try
others.
changing your bass strings, and then try changing the pickups. Cut your nails. Honestly.
Dude, every single guitar that I buy, guitar or bass, I change the pickups out of.
Yeah,
Um, One of the largest factors between an inexpensive instrument and an expensive instrument, one of the major factors is the electronics.
mhm,
If you switch out the electronics, you can usually take a low level or beginner level instrument
yeah.
and turn it into a mid to high level instrument just with a
There,
couple of add-ons.
yeah, and there are tons of Frankensteins out there that, and I know a couple of people who have guitars like this. they're just built out of whatever they can build them out of, and then as soon as somebody plays it, they want that guitar, and somebody else plays it and they want that guitar. Yeah, there you go. I mean,
This
it's
is an
just
Ibanez
mhm.
with a Fender lefty neck on it, custom wound pickups from Matt, and a bunch of my own little customizations. Like this is my Frankenstein. It's like it's with that with having no exactly right. With having no knowledge of how Eddie Van Halen built his guitar, I don't know. My dad was a car guy, right? We touched on this in the last episode.
Mhm.
And but it's just you build what you want. And so like
Yeah,
this me doing that and pulling it apart and changing the pickups, that was huge to me. That's always been
it made you want to play more.
it made me want to play more. And the better you make yourself sound to you, the more you're gonna want to play.
Yep.
You know, some of the best things you can do is just spend like $100 on a new pedal because it might make you play like I don't know 100 more hours.
It
And at
really
that
will.
point, that pedal was only $1 an hour, and it made you a better player.
Exactly.
You know, like
Exactly.
so.
So
Well,
awesome.
Holly, you are awesome. This was a
You're
great
awesome,
episode.
Z.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
and
great
we're
episode.
closing out. We're beginning and we're closing out a year as we're filming, but we're beginning a new one when we
Right.
post this.
This is the first
First
episode
episode
of
of the new year.
2021 of
Ah,
Bass Cafe with Holly and Dean. So this is our fifth episode, and that's a pretty cool milestone. Our fifth episode
yeah,
is the
I love
first
this.
one of 2021.
Yeah. So thank
Yeah,
you
this is
to
really
everybody
awesome.
followed us so far. We've got several people on our YouTube now, and hopefully people are listening on the podcast and everything. So we want to thank you all for being here with us, and we're looking forward to a very busy year.
Yes, and make sure to check out Holly West at patreon.com/Holly West Music and everywhere on Instagram, Facebook, all that jazz.com, right?
Yeah.
And you can find me on everything else, patreon.com/Dean Music Official, Insta Dean Music Official, everything Dean Music Official. I hope everybody has a smashing 2021. Make sure to check out WB Gear, and we will see all of you guys next week.
Bye, guys.